Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, LeBron missed Monday night's loss to the San Antonio Spurs. Just one more reason the future is as cloudy as ever. We'll talk about all the clouds coming up next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up bright and early for you as fast as we possibly can, no matter where you get your podcasts, how you get your podcasts. We got content for you, and we appreciate all the support. Locked On Lakers on YouTube as well. Subscribe to that, and you might get the podcast with visuals early, as opposed to just the audio product itself. So again,
a reminder really quick, because we have not told people about it lately, and we should be better about it because it's important. Make sure that you are leaving comments on the show's Apple page. If you leave a 5-star review, even with a negative comment or a negative question, whatever, if it's negativity, long as you leave 5 stars, there is a very good chance we will read that question or negative comment on the show. If, however, you praise the hell out of us with 1 star, I can promise you it's never getting read. But we want to involve you guys as much as possible in the show. So that's a really good place to do that because we will notice it. And also it helps us out with algorithms. So everybody wins.
Yeah. Also, Cam Brothers on Twitter. You can leave comments on the Locked On Lakers YouTube page with every episode. We go there looking for ways to involve readers and all listeners and viewers. And so those are the best ways to communicate with the show. So, it was a busy day on Monday before the Lakers even took the court in San Antonio. A big article from Sam Amick and Bill Oram at The Athletic, breaking down all kinds of things with the Lakers in the front office with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson and Phil Jackson and Kobe Bryant, and a lot of names that are extremely familiar to Lakers fans, which, as Andy and I will talk about, is a recurring problem with how everything runs around this organization. But also the tensions that still remain with Russell Westbrook and the coaching staff. That's something we'll try to get to today. And this was all before the Lakers learned that LeBron wasn't going to play on Monday. Left knee swelled up on him on Monday, and he was unavailable. The Lakers took the floor without him, and they lost 117-110.
Yeah, it's the same knee that's been giving him problems periodically throughout the season, and it feels, Brian, just incredibly apropos, insert chef's kiss gif, that the following game after LeBron puts up 56 against the Warriors, looks like he is somehow managing to turn back the clock and, beating at least one night, putting a beat down on Father Time. We are reminded, because this season is this season. No, he's not. No, he's not. Yeah. Not on a permanent basis. No, you are not out of the woods. No, you are not allowed to have nice things.
And, the fragility of the team and the team stars is obviously an issue now. And, I was talking to my wife after the game, and I'm listening to the press conference on Zoom, and we're taking care of our domestic household things, the baby down and all that stuff. So the Lakers win? No, nothing new there. And I was like, yeah, but LeBron didn't play, and AD is out. And my wife says, oh, well, AD is like the new Bynum, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, first of all, I was like, good pull. Second of all, ouch. But that is a long-term concern with the team. Before we even get into what happened in this game, it's another game where LeBron wasn't available. It's another game where Anthony Davis wasn't available, and they ain't getting any younger. And none of this is particularly new with Davis at all. And so even while we can sort of pretend it's still kind of an evolution when it comes to LeBron as a pairing, it's hard to believe that they would get through consecutive seasons, the next 2 or 3, whatever it might be, that a healthy season wouldn't be the exception to the rule. It would be more the fluke.
Yeah. Look, Brian, I don't know if today is going to be the show that we get into this at length, because there's a lot of other stuff that's more immediate to today. So, and this is a conversation that definitely can happen down the road, even the immediate road.
Many times between now and August, if I think I know where you're going.
But I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again. LeBron is still a great player, and as we saw on Saturday, he is still capable of doing stuff that makes you go, God damn. Like, at any age, the performance he had against the Warriors is a goddamn. At the same time, I do not think the idea of extending him, past his contract, which is out, which runs out after next season, I don't think it's an automatic no-brainer. It may be an automatic no-brainer just in terms of practicality and pragmatism and where the Lakers are right now and the cold dollars and cents of it all. And just the idea that you never really want to do a rebuild, because a rebuild's always painful. And at the same time, the Lakers really hate doing it, but it is not the no-brainer that I think a lot of people make it out to be. And again, it's not necessarily the conversation we're looking to have today, but just little food for thought for people.
The question really, to frame it, is just like, what's the alternative? And this is obviously stuff that you're right. We'll
it's a complex question.
We'll spend a lot of time on this
It's
between now
complex,
and,
but I just think a lot of people treat it as a no-brainer.
I think you're probably right about that. One thing I normally will say, Normally I will say about these types of games, no LeBron, no AD, like, what we see doesn't really matter. I think this is actually a slight exception to that rule, because the way this team has gone, because Westbrook, who we will talk about, and his relationship both to the team and certainly to the city, and all of this stuff that's gone wrong over the course of this year, because Russ hasn't performed as a genuine third star. These other guys, if the Lakers are going to make a miracle run, it's obviously going to be LeBron, AD playing like bubble versions of themselves, but it's going to be Monk and THT and, Carmelo and other guys kind of doing more than you would expect. And so a night like Monday, where Austin Reaves takes a much bigger role offensively in the third quarter and, does some stuff, is potentially at least more significant. And I quite frankly, I enjoyed watching Monday's game more than most games the Lakers have played this year, in part because it was like, well, they're probably not going to win. And let's see what, YOLO Malik Monk does, and YOLO THT, and YOLO, Austin Reaves. And it was a fun game to watch.
It was bookended for Russ with a very rough start and a rough finish. He got into very quick foul trouble. He picked up his third foul like 90 seconds into the second quarter, and this was when he already had 4 turnovers. But then it's funny, and Russ is going to end up a conversation point in this show, but there was a period where he came back into the game and stabilized some stuff, and the Lakers were starting to get a lead. And in the fourth quarter, with about 9 minutes left, the game was tied at, I believe, 97 all, and Russ stepped out to take a break. He was off the floor for a little more than
you make it sound like you went out like to have like a smoke. Just stepped out for a break. Yeah, you know what? Hey, manager, it's my break time. Union says I get 15 minutes here.
Look, he's not going to argue with the local 407. I mean, this is the way this stuff works. But
stepped out for a break.
You got to rest, whatever, man. But in like a little more than 2 minutes, Lakers were down by 9. And it was a reminder to me, and I tweeted out something to this effect at Cam Brothers, like, Russ is not popular in Lakerland. And again, this is something specifically that we are going to get into. And I get it. And he has not had a good season, and he has not made things easy for himself at times on a lot of different levels. But the people calling, I'm talking about Laker fans, I'm talking about media, for Russ to come off the bench, to have his minutes severely reduced, end up like sort of a supporting player on this team, that ain't going to work.
And well, they're a talent poor team, and so
Mhm.
let's talk about Russ because the story in the Athletic on Monday from Bill and Sam talked about um, the relationship that Russ has with the coaching staff and how sour it is, and it dovetails, I think, in some ways really well with the story of the day, which was Russell Westbrook's wife actually, and causing some stir on Twitter, and Westbrook responding to that after the game on Monday. We'll talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Bet Online. Basketball in full swing for both pro and college hoops, and for all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds and information. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the games start. Sometimes you just take a break. That was inelegantly phrased.
Listen to your best work.
I don't know all the terminology.
Hey, Frank. Sorry, it's break time. Break time for Russ.
Takes out his thermos of coffee.
My soup's getting cold, Frank.
Gonna call the old ball and chain.
Yeah, smoke break. So it was the story in the Athletic got to kind of reiterated that, despite, I guess, a bit of detente in terms of headlines, the Vogel not excluding the idea of bringing Russ off the bench and everything that's come off the year, but it's been at least a little bit quieter in terms of outward Russ is real mad at folks talk. This story reports that the tension is still there, to say the least, and that it just seems very difficult for the Lakers to bring Westbrook back next year if they can find a way out of this relationship. Meanwhile, as what I guess was apparently part of a sort of a long back and forth between Nina Westbrook, Russ's wife, and Skip Bayless, who we don't like talking about on this show. It was, she put out that, all of this stuff going on this year has been very difficult to the point that she's getting like threats to her family over Twitter, like from Lakers fans and people, because they're just so pissed off at Russ for playing poorly and ruining his season. Obviously we shouldn't have to talk about, Andy, don't threaten people's families on Twitter, social media, or anywhere else, you morons. It's a flipping basketball game. But to me, it just really speaks to how horribly this season has gone based versus expectations. I can guarantee you this is not how Russ's family expected they would be seen and treated and all of this stuff around the city going into the year. It's just not.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, this is not a one-off in terms of, Laker fans in general. I remember about 10 years ago when we were covering I believe it was the 2012 team, Steve Blake missed a big shot in the playoffs against Denver.
And
you're
right.
He and his family started receiving death threats as well. And, it really upset. Steve was a very, very soft-spoken, at times damn near mute guy, but he really went into great depth about how much this upset him, how much it upset his wife, who was the complete opposite of him, very kind of like Nina Westbrook, very active on social media. And it's a reminder that quite frankly, social media, and say this is somebody who's active on it, as are you, in different forms, whatever. Human beings were not meant to be this easily connected to complete strangers without filters, without sometimes your name connected to it, and without often repercussions, like the ability to be at your absolute ugliest and to be able to connect with pretty much anybody that you want, whether you're talking about some rando on whatever form of social media or a famous person, an athlete, whatever, like the ability to be that directly in front of that person, even virtually, it's not a healthy thing for us societally. And this issue the Westbrooks are dealing with is just one of these zillion reminders of this.
Yeah, and look, I'm willing to bet that it's the vast majority of Lakers fans are not threatening his family,
Sure.
are not yelling obscenities at Laker games, are not are doing what fans are sort of in the lane, what you're allowed to do, you boo, you whatever. But it was nonetheless really sad to hear that Russ is nervous, doesn't want to bring his family to games, not just
He talked
worried
about that
being
after the
threatened.
game.
He talked about this after the game on Monday, but just because it's just gotten unpleasant, bringing your kids to a game where your dad's getting yelled at and booed, and people are yelling Westbrook and all that other kind of stuff, which in the grand scheme of things, Westbrook has said like he's no longer going to kind of tolerate. He feels it's disrespectful to his name, and there were a lot of reasons for that. It's a mild taunt, there's no question, but just the idea that the environment for your kids at a game in the city where you grew up, I just feel like, again, we talked about having sympathy and some empathy for Russ in a show at the end of last week, I believe it was. And it's not that you excuse the play, and it's not that, but like these are people, and like you think about any job that you go to, and you're like, you have such high hopes and you have such like expectations of what you want it to be and whatever. And part of it is I get to bring my kids to games and all that, and it's gotten so bad that you can't do it. And that to me only accelerates the brokenness of what this has been, because it's not going to get better. Russ is an avatar at this point for every bad choice the Lakers have made this year. He would remain that going into next year if he stays. Maybe I guess if he played great, he could turn it around. But the moment anything looks bad, he's going to be the one who's blamed for it. I even with the idea, Andy, that this could be bad, I did not expect a disaster on this level, and I don't think he did at all. And it's just kind of sad.
It's unpleasant. I mean, it sounds like, or at least in terms of what we've heard, that Westbrook is getting the worst of this. But, this is something that, a lot of guys on the team, they've been dealing with what feels like heckling and taunts and stuff like that go well beyond what would be acceptable from fans. There was that clip that went viral, I believe it was last week, where you saw separate interactions between fans and LeBron, and fans and Russ, and fans and Trevor Ariza. And, we've seen that with Melo before. We've seen it with Rajon Rondo before. And, I do think that some of this is a byproduct of how bad it's going this season. I think some of this is an extension of just increasingly bad fan behavior at sporting events,
which I think is related to the social media point you were making before. You sort of get accustomed to a place where you're not going to be held accountable for the statements you make, or you can threaten people anonymously. That when you get into a building and you're surrounded by other human beings and people can see you, you forget. It's like, I am allowed to do these things, and people are idiots.
Let's be honest.
They drink a little too much, and all of a sudden, boop,
let's be honest, man.
To be thrown out of games.
The last several years in this country, and it's been accelerated by, the pandemic, and how frustrated and upset people got during the pandemic for reasons that were both justified and at times, I think, people being incredibly selfish, and then coming out of it. We've forgotten how to act like humans, man. We just have. Like, societally, we are becoming really bad towards each other. And, this is an extension of that bad behavior and our inability to just interact with each other without it just devolving into chaos and ugliness.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think it's getting any better anytime soon.
All right. So let's get to some more stuff in that article from Sam and Bill in The Athletic. A lot about the way the front office operates, from the influence of Kurt Rambis, which we've talked about, but also Magic Johnson and Phil Jackson. We'll do it next. We have made a point that both of us are a little concerned that things inside the building in El Segundo are a little bit insular, and that perhaps the Lakers need to get the benefit of widening their circle a little bit. And if you are of that belief, then Monday's feature from Bill and Sam Amick at The Athletic, it was not reassuring. It talked about not just the influence of Kurt Rambis on the front office and on how things operate and decisions that the Lakers make, but also that Jeannie Buss frequently consults Magic Johnson still. Just a little bit like Ted Cruz endorsing Donald Trump, but to get too political. And
he bailed on you and wasn't that good at the job to begin with.
And annihilated your GM on the way out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost caused like burying the team kind of friction on his way out. You know, like Rob or not like Rob. Like he put Rob in a horrible position and put the franchise in a horrible position.
I don't know. I think that day that he appeared on First Take like 2 hours before Frank Vogel was introduced, that's just a coincidence. There was nothing malevolent behind that
at all. And so that there was
the
that
date had been scheduled. Nothing you could do about it.
It was on the calendar. He's not going to back out.
Even Magic's not above the calendar.
But also Phil Jackson, Andy. And you know, Phil's been consulted on what's been going on inside the building and offering his advice. And it's not that I think these are like dumb people. It's a little incestuous. It's a little bit insulated. I just don't think it's a healthy way to run a franchise.
Well, I mean, as Bill and Sam pointed out in their piece, you know, Phil was at the game during the win against Golden State on Saturday, and that was not just a pure coincidence. You know, as much as it's, you know, obviously going to get the rumor mill going, because it doesn't take much to get the Laker rumor mill going.
No, people were asking us on Twitter if they thought Phil is a viable coaching option for next year.
He is, I believe, 76.
He's 113 years old. The answer is no.
No. I mean, I look.
Unless Phil can coach the team via Zoom, he's not going to do it anyway.
I was going to say, I don't mean this in a mean-spirited way. I don't know if Phil is like physically at a place where he can handle the rigors of practice and stuff on a regular. Forget the travel. I just mean like the stuff that you have to do physically as an NBA coach. I mean, he's had like hip replacements and knee replacements, and you know, I mean, we covered Phil and. You know, the last several years that, I mean, he was not walking well and things like there's a lot. It's a physically, I think people forget about this, Brian. It's a physically demanding job.
It's just, but even beyond that, and I actually don't think this is an idea that they would entertain, but it's just, even the concept is one of these things where you look at and, you know, you quickly shake it off, because even for the Lakers, you would just say like, oh, they're not going to do that. But there is still this very lingering feeling that that Jeannie, who unquestionably, I would say like her heart is in the right place. She wants the team to be successful.
Yes.
And, you know, she is not an apathetic owner in the way that some places. But she is also, I think, as time goes on, I know this is a point that you've made, some of her flaws as a manager of a franchise, as a steward of a franchise, are becoming more apparent. And it's not that the team has been an unmitigated disaster. They have won a title, but it just the signs are distressing in terms of when you think about, well, how are they going to get from point A to point B? What happens if things get rocky? Do they change people? Do they not change? Like all of this stuff. And if you never venture outside the building, you know, the idea, who are they going to hire? that was going to be like the bridge with, it was the clutch guy, that they were talking about, who's like, oh, it's Jamal Wilkes' son.
Jamal
Right.
Wilkes' son.
Like, and you think about, because he's both clutch and he's a Laker. It's like, they got to get out. Like USC had to get out of the building. The Lakers need to get out of the building. And I also don't know how they do that, because the people who are currently there, if we thought it was hard for Jeannie to fire her brother, it's going to be even harder for her to hire or fire Rob or fire Kurt, because she likes those people. She doesn't like her brother.
Guys like Kurt or Linda or Rob with the connection to Kobe, which, beyond her relationship, beyond her relationship with Rob, because, she's known Rob for a long time, that layer with Kobe complicates it.
And there was, some of the reporting in the story that Jeannie was going to offer Kobe a more concrete position in the front office, whether he would have taken it or not. So maybe we discuss on a different episode and whatever. But again, bringing somebody, a trusted voice, into the front office, and it reinforces. And I think I talked about this on the show, a few weeks ago. When you talk about Rob is also kind of a symbol of Kobe's presence in the organization. So if you let Rob go, you're also letting a part of Kobe go. And I don't mean that as a criticism of Rob. It's not Rob's fault. And Rob and Kobe were incredibly close.
It was a really deep friendship.
It gets to the problem of that. Like, the problem with firing Jim for Jeannie wasn't Jim. It was her father. That was the arrangement that her father had created. And that was the burden. This is something that she would have created and then be letting go of her closest friends. Like, it will be very hard when I have to fire you, for example. I'll do it. But numbers slip. I mean, you're going, but I won't like it. I'll feel bad for an hour or two.
When I was thinking about it, though, with Phil, though, and, like specifically the idea of reaching out to Phil on this, which I guess in a vacuum wouldn't feel like necessarily the worst or strangest thing in the world. He is, after all, Phil Jackson. The last time Phil ran an organization was the Knicks. It's the one and only time Phil has truly, by title, run an organization. And that did not go well.
How'd that go? Yeah.
At all. But also, so like in terms of, what Phil's insights with, Jeannie's decisions that, come to running the organization. I'm not saying he could have nothing valuable to offer at all, but the idea that Phil would be an oracle along those lines, I think is just faulty and reductive. But also, too, like the idea that, for example, like Phil had said in this piece, I think it sounded like she's been talking with him in part to try to maybe get some insights into how to better reach Russ and how to make this relationship with Russ work better. Phil, the more time Phil spent around the NBA until he was eventually out of it, but like those later years, the less connection he was showing with this generation's NBA player.
Correct.
And like, I remember during Phil's last season with the Lakers in 2011, which we covered, I remember Phil talking about how, it was just during one of these pregame scrums, like how he was having more difficulty connecting with the younger players on his team. Like, not that he didn't like them, but just it was harder to find those points where they had things in common. And that was in 2011.
I realize he's still Phil Jackson, but he's been disconnected from the game, from the day to day.
There's a line, Brian, in the movie Goodfellas where Karen Hill, Henry Hill's wife, is talking about the lifestyle that's, insulated in the mob. And she says, I mean, there were never any outsiders around. Absolutely never. And being together all the time made everything seem all the more normal. It reminds me so much of this organization. Like, just how keeping yourself in that mode, the longer you do it, the more it just feels like the normal only way you would ever do it.
Yeah.
It'd be
And,
nice if she reached out to somebody that she hasn't
didn't
known for 25 years for counsel. Just
it didn't turn out well in Goodfellas either.
no.
Everyone either dies or goes to prison. So,
Mhm.
all right, a lot to cover over the
Or
course of
ends
the
up
week. By
eating
the
egg
way,
noodles and ketchup.
LeBron they are hopeful LeBron will play Wednesday in Houston, but don't know yet. It would be nice if he did. It'd be nice if the Lakers took advantage of a couple games against bad teams, Houston and Washington coming up. Washington's going to be a really fun one just because of the whole former Laker thing. Kyle Kuzma is going to try to score 800 points. I think we all know that. So we'll see how that goes. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to that, and we will see everybody on Wednesday.